The rain fell hard over Seattle, turning streets into shining lines of light, and Emma walked fast with her coat pulled tight, unaware that this ordinary evening was quietly opening a door she would never fully close, because earlier that day she had agreed to help at a small library event without much thought, and now she stood near the entrance, shaking rain from her hair, watching strangers move past shelves and tables, until she noticed Daniel for the first time, standing alone near the window with a stack of books in his arms and a thoughtful look on his face, and there was nothing dramatic about him, no sudden spark or loud moment, just a calm presence that made her slow down without knowing why, and when their eyes met he smiled in a polite, careful way, the kind that asked nothing and promised nothing yet felt honest, and soon they were assigned to work together, arranging chairs and greeting visitors, speaking in short sentences that stayed safe and light, but between those words lived a strange ease, as if they had known each other longer than a few minutes, and as the event moved quickly with people coming and going, Emma found herself listening for Daniel's voice, noticing how he paused before answering questions, how he laughed softly instead of loudly, how he paid attention in a way that felt rare, and he noticed her too, the way she spoke with warmth, the way she focused fully on whoever stood in front of her, the way she carried both strength and gentleness without trying. And time passed faster than expected, the rain slowed, the crowd thinned, and when the chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed, they stood there unsure how to end a moment neither had planned to begin, so Daniel asked if she wanted coffee, not as a bold move but as a natural step, and Emma agreed without thinking, and they walked down the wet street together, their reflections moving side by side in the glass windows, talking about simple things like favorite authors, past jobs, cities they had lived in, yet each answer revealed something deeper, something careful and true, and Emma felt a quiet pull she did not name, while Daniel felt a calm tension he could not explain. And when they reached the cafe they sat close but not touching, the air warm and filled with low music, and for a brief moment Emma wondered if this meeting mattered, or if it was just another passing connection, but the thought stayed with her even as they said goodbye later that night, exchanging numbers with a polite certainty that surprised them both, and in the days that followed they met again and again, sometimes by plan, sometimes by chance, walks along the water, short lunches, shared jokes, long talks that ended too soon, and nothing crossed a clear line, nothing broke a rule, yet something formed quietly between them, a shared understanding that lived in looks and pauses, in the way Daniel always turned when Emma spoke, in the way Emma remembered small details about him, and both of them sensed the weight of it, the unspoken truth growing heavier with every meeting, because Daniel had reasons to stay careful, a life already shaped by choices, responsibilities he took seriously, and Emma carried her own plans, her own future pulling her forward, and they never said what hovered between them, not because it was wrong, but because it felt fragile, like naming it might break it, and so the secret took shape not as an action, but as a feeling, a shared silence that became part of their days, and Emma noticed how it followed her home, how she replayed moments in her mind, wondering why someone she barely knew had begun to matter so much, while Daniel found himself distracted at work, thinking of her laugh, her honesty, the ease he felt when she was near, and both believed they were in control, that this was harmless, that life would soon shift and carry them apart, but even then the seed was planted, the quiet beginning of something that would stay with them far longer than either expected, because some connections do not announce themselves loudly, they enter softly, they wait, and they leave a mark before anyone realizes they have arrived. Daniel believed that feelings could be managed if he stayed busy, and after Emma moved away he filled his days with work, early mornings, late meetings, and quiet evenings that left little room for reflection, yet even as weeks turned into months, her absence did not fade the way he expected, because the memories stayed sharp and clear, following him through ordinary moments like shadows he could not shake. And he often thought about the last afternoon they spent together by the water, where the sky was pale and the air cool, and Emma sat beside him watching boats move slowly across the harbor, her face calm but her eyes full of questions she never asked, and he remembered how he felt the words rise in his chest, how close he came to telling her that she mattered more than he had planned, but fear stopped him. Fear of changing something that felt balanced, fear of creating pain where there was none, and so he chose silence, believing it was the kinder choice, and when Emma left for her new job, they promised to stay in touch, and at first they did, messages filled with updates, shared jokes, small pieces of daily life, but slowly the replies came later. The words became shorter, not because they cared less, but because life demanded attention elsewhere, and Daniel told himself this was normal, that connections like theirs were meant to fade gently, yet he noticed how often he checked his phone, how he reread old messages, how certain songs or places brought her back without warning. And he began to understand that what they had shared was not easily replaced, because it had been built on honesty, patience, and the quiet comfort of being seen. And as time passed, Daniel tried to move forward, meeting new people, attending social events, smiling and engaging, but something always felt slightly out of reach, like he was holding back without meaning to, and he realized it was because he had never allowed himself to fully accept what Emma had become to him. Never allowed the secret to take shape in words, and that unspoken truth weighed on him more heavily than he expected, because it left no clear ending, no closure, only questions that returned when the world grew quiet, and he wondered if Emma carried the same thoughts, if she ever looked back and felt the same pull, or if she had found peace in moving on. And one evening, while sorting through old emails on a quiet night in his apartment, he saw her name again, sitting among the past like it had never left, and his heart reacted before his mind could stop it, because seeing her name reminded him that some feelings do not disappear just because they are ignored. And as he stared at the screen, he felt the weight of every choice he had made, every word he had held back, and he understood that the secret they shared was not something he could control forever, because it lived not in the past, but inside him, waiting for the moment he would finally face it. Emma built a steady life in Chicago with careful effort, waking early, walking busy streets, focusing on her work, and surrounding herself with kind people. Yet beneath the calm rhythm of her days there lived a restlessness she never fully explained, because no matter how full her schedule became, moments of quiet always carried Daniel back to her mind, and she tried to understand why someone from a chapter she had closed still felt unfinished, especially when she had made choices that seemed right and responsible. And she reminded herself that what they shared had never crossed a line, had never become something that demanded an answer, yet the absence of clear words made it harder to release, and the secret returned in small ways that felt unfair. A song playing in a cafe that reminded her of their long talks, a walk by the river that echoed the afternoons they once shared, a thoughtful pause in conversation that felt too familiar, and Emma often caught herself smiling at memories she had no right to miss, and she wondered if she had imagined the depth of it, or if Daniel had felt the same quiet pull and chosen to step away. And despite her efforts to move forward, she noticed how she compared new connections to an old feeling that had never fully formed. Not because she expected perfection, but because what she and Daniel shared had been honest and calm, free from pressure, and rooted in respect. And as months passed she learned to live with the ache without letting it rule her, telling herself that some connections were meant to teach rather than last. Yet on certain nights when the city slowed and the noise softened, she allowed herself to admit that she missed the way Daniel listened, the way he understood without explanation. And she questioned whether silence had truly been the kindest choice, or if it had simply delayed an ending they both feared. And then one evening, after a long day that left her tired and thoughtful, her phone lit up with a message she did not expect, and seeing Daniel's name brought a sudden mix of warmth and uncertainty that caught her off guard, because part of her wanted to protect the peace she had built, while another part remembered the comfort of being truly seen. And as she stared at the screen, Emma understood that distance had not erased what they shared, it had only buried it, and now the secret they had carried separately was asking to be acknowledged. And she knew that responding could reopen feelings she had carefully contained, but ignoring it would leave the story unfinished. And in that quiet moment, before she typed a single word, Emma felt the weight of choice return, reminding her that some truths remain patient, waiting for the courage to be faced. When Emma and Daniel finally spoke after years of quiet distance, the conversation moved quickly yet carefully, as if both knew that too much hesitation would send them back into silence. And they started with simple updates about work, cities, routines, but beneath every sentence lived the reason they were there. And it did not take long before honesty rose naturally, because time had softened fear and replaced it with clarity. And Daniel admitted that he had often wondered if staying silent had been the right choice, not because he regretted respecting boundaries, but because holding back truth had left him carrying a weight he never expected, and Emma listened without interruption, feeling both relief and sadness as his words confirmed what she had long suspected, that what they shared had been real even without a name, and she told him that she had built a good life, one she was proud of, yet part of her had always wondered how something so gentle could leave such a deep mark, and they spoke openly about missed chances, not with regret, but with understanding, recognizing that they had been shaped by responsibility, timing, and fear of causing harm, and as the conversation flowed, they realized that the secret had not weakened them, it had taught them patience, respect, and emotional honesty, because neither had tried to take more than the other could give, and while there was a quiet sadness in knowing that their lives had moved in different directions, there was also peace in finally acknowledging what had lived unspoken for so long, and Daniel expressed gratitude for the way Emma had shown him what calm connection felt like, while Emma shared how Daniel had raised her standards for kindness and presence, and neither asked for promises, because both understood that love does not always ask for permanence to be meaningful. And as the call continued, the tension that once tormented them slowly eased, replaced by warmth and clarity, and when they laughed together it felt lighter than before, no longer burdened by questions, and as the night grew late they reached a natural pause, knowing that this conversation was not an ending or a beginning, but a release, and they agreed to stay in touch with honesty rather than expectation, and when they finally said goodbye, Emma sat quietly for a moment, feeling the strange comfort of closure without loss. While Daniel looked out his window, breathing more freely than he had in years, because the secret no longer lived in the shadows, and although it would always be part of their story, it no longer controlled them, and both understood that some connections exist to remind people of their emotional depth, not to define their future, and as they returned to their separate lives, they carried forward not longing, but gratitude, knowing that what they shared had mattered deeply, had changed them gently, and had proven that even unspoken love can leave a lasting, meaningful truth behind.